We're back here in the live studio of WLCN, program Viewpoint 96.3. Our guests this morning, Laura Slayton and Charles Anderson. And the co-host to my right is the 51% owner of the show, Judith K. Busby. Laura, if you have any questions of Charles to ask him about his experiences, you feel free to jump right in there. I'd like to point out just for a minute, Charles, that while there were many and multitudinous glaring examples of not adhering to the Geneva Convention by many Germans, on balance, we're better to have been a prisoner of the Germans than of the Orientals. The Oriental mindset towards prisoners was entirely different, and they were really very sadistic in many, many cases. I just remember reading this book, Unbroken. If you haven't read that, it's a book that anybody should read. Written by a famous Olympic track star, and he was in a B-24 that fell apart on him out in the in Pacific, and anyway, he ended up as a Japanese prisoner of war. Some pretty rigorous and rough circumstances that he endured.
The Bataan March was without a doubt the most cruel and inhumane thing, and we didn't have any of that. Well, our march from February the 28th to May the 10th or 11th, somewhere along there when I was liberated, was nothing in comparison to the Bataan March. We slept in barns and so forth and so on, had flea bites and all these various things, but we were not beaten or stabbed or this type of thing. To my knowledge, we had a very mean officer who did not treat the people very nicely. And about a week and a half before we were to be liberated, they switched crews.
Oh. So
that we would not take any offense to any of them, and we didn't with the crew.
Exact your measure of devotion for him.
But he got his at the other side of the coin. We were told that he got his.
Now, when you were marching from February to May, where were you marching to and why?
Well, we would march in direction of whatever the offensive was opposite. In other words, if Americans were pushing, we would go towards the Russians, and if the Russians was pushing, we would go towards the Americans, and we tried to stay in neutral ground, so that we were not, I guess, so that we were not subject to combat. But that's the way we went. It was zigzag back and forth all across Germany, and we would march maybe 6 to 10 miles a day, and they marched till you found a good big barn to sleep in. That's what the real problem was.
Now, if the menu at your stalag was a little slim, how did it work for you when you were on the march?
Less.
What in the world did they feed you?
Less.
But
thin and thinner.
Fewer potatoes, huh?
Thin and thinner.
Yeah. Well, we were subject to if the farmer had potatoes, he would share them. Not necessarily wanted to, but we confiscated.
They'd commandeer them, huh?
Because we were hungry, but that was the only thing we ever had was potatoes to eat.
And you ate them raw, I suppose, when you were on the march.
We had little fires. We could usually boil them, and you ate the peeling and everything because it was, and so. But it was. Oh, I don't know. I sometimes dream about it, but it's. It was a rich experience.
Charles,
your attitude is so beautiful. You're definitely a cup half full type guy, and. Does the attitude of the soldier make a lot of difference in his chances to come out okay on the other end?
Oh, I think so. I think so. I'm the last of my crew that's alive. All my crews have died. There were 4 of us who got out, and the top turret gunner and the lower turret gunner and the man who was on the opposite side of the airplane that I was, in the back, he got out and I got out, and so and they've all passed away for some reason or other. Not necessarily because of the experience in the prisoner camp, but just natural death situation. one was in Arizona, one was in North Carolina, and myself, and the other fellow that he was not very popular in our crew, and so we didn't have very much connection with him. But the three of us tried to get together as often as we could to keep our, and finally the last one passed away about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, was there ever an organization in Logan County of POWs?
No.
I was never aware of any.
Springfield and Peoria had, but my connection that I have with the POWs, I had when I was wintering in Florida. They had very strong. There were a lot of us down there.
Well, for the most part, Judith Kay and Laura, these gentlemen came home. That was that. That was done and over with, and started getting on with their lives and making their own contributions in their own way to their communities. And none has done more so than our friend Charles here. He came about, went into the postal department, did his work in a yeoman-like way, and has made it a point to contribute to his community, the church and the community and veterans organization down through the years. We appreciate that sort of an attitude, Charles. That's the kind of thing that makes America what we have and what we enjoy today. You know, when you think about D-Day, it doesn't take a whole lot of inspiration to just kind of visualize those poor guys out on these landing crafts and these ships waiting to go aboard and tossing and turning, and oftentimes, as I said before, tossing their cookies as well as everything else, and then going over some of those that had to go over the side in those cargo nets, drop into these boats. Some of them have to drop a few feet before they, some of them never made it, some of them got in between the boats, and it was a pretty horrendous scene if you stop to think about the entire thing. Then you see they get the landing crafts where the bow drops down. Four guys jumped out. Some of them jumped in water over their heads, couldn't swim, and that was the end of that. It was really a pretty horrific day. And when you think at the end of the day what the accomplishments were, it's pretty amazing. I had to do a little research here, and I found out that we had over 160,000 that day of British, Canadian, Free French, American, that first day. And I've stood on that beach many years later, and it's pretty amazing to stand there and reflect on what went on that particular day.
Bill, have you had the opportunity to read Lindy Fancher's book? Have you had the opportunity to read that?
Yes. Yes.
The first part of it was very, very good. It was I didn't care for the second part of it nearly as much, but he got a battlefield commission, and that's rare. And he took a submachine gun and converted it into an automatic machine gun, and he received a battlefield commission for this. And I talked to him about a week ago, and he's still able to get around a little bit in his wheelchair, and he's down living with his son in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was with in the hedgerow offensive, and he used snowbanks and everything else to defend himself, and he probably is as near a hero as I know.
I'd like to add something to that. Lindy, I was fortunate enough to meet because he came and taught the kids in the classroom at West Lincoln Broadwell School years ago, and he also provided us with a pilot by the name of Lloyd Mason, who flew a friend of mine who parachuted into the schoolyard. So Lindy was real gung-ho, and the kids absolutely loved him. I remember him so much. Yes, yes.
I was going to ask you, Laura, about your interest in devotion to this. Did this come about from your family, having talked about your uncle? Is that the impetus for your...
Absolutely. When I was growing up, my parents taught all four of us kids to respect veterans and to respect our freedoms and to
they
use...
did a good job.
Thank you. I love my parents, that's for sure.
They sure indoctrinated you well.
Thank you. And so my earliest memories, of course, were when we used to take flowers to my grandfather's grave, which my uncle's grave, my uncle Lawrence Boney Slayton, was killed in World War II before my birth. But I always knew that it was so important to never forget the reason why he wasn't with us.
Boney Slayton was my classmate in high school.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
Yes, he was.
Why Boney?
I don't know.
Was he so thin or something?
I don't know. My dad used to say they were all hungry. So I don't know. I wish I could have known him. That's a great loss in our family. And I think people that, when I've spoken to other people that have family losses, there's always such a void, such an emptiness, such a sorrow, and it's so deep-seated, and it's so just untouchable. If you haven't lived in a family that has lost somebody in a military activity, or action rather, you just can't even relate, I don't think. Even though I didn't know my uncle, the impact of his death has caused me always to be acutely aware of my freedom, and that he didn't die in vain. Because once we forget about these people that have done so much for us, I'm talking all military people, then we do lose that importance of they're giving their lives for us. So I thank all veterans.
Charlie, I was going to ask you, I hope this isn't indelicate, about post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's kind of a catch-all sometimes, maybe.
Never heard of that in your day, did they, Charles?
No, not until the Veterans Administration picked it up and started working with it.
But did you see that phenomena in people, even though it didn't have a name?
You didn't look for that type of thing. You didn't look, Judy. You
wasn't
you were
invented.
Only interested in one thing.
No.
And that was that you were hungry, and where was your next meal coming from, and whether you were going to be able to get one or not. And the men just existed. You didn't hunt for things that, well, has he got a sore thumb, or has he got a blister on the bottom of his foot, or that didn't seem to involve you. You were so hungry and so desiring of food that you just didn't look for that. You were conscious of whether your best friend was ill or sick, and you carried him for a day, or that type of thing. But no, I don't think post-syndrome had anything, introduction into our mood of life.
What did you weigh, Charlie, when you were rescued? And you're a tall man.
Yeah, he's a big
I
friend.
weighed 143 pounds.
You weighed 143?
Yeah, I was over 200 pounds because I had a 28-foot chute. If you were under 200 pounds, you got a 26-foot chute. And I had a 28-foot chute, so I weighed over 200 pounds when I bailed out of the airplane.
That potato diet didn't make you too fat, did it?
Did you know that you were going to be rescued, or was it a complete surprise?
Oh, I had no idea what was going to happen to me when...
Can you tell us what your feelings were that day?
I would think that I was appreciative of the fact that I was treated humanely at that moment. The man was scared of me, and he wondered what I was going to do next. He didn't know me. He didn't, never seen probably another soldier, and I was trying to take care of my parachute because I knew I was going to have to wrap my wings up, and I was going to use the parachute to do that. When he came on me, and he was, I would say that I would probably treated him the same way had I have been in his circumstances that he was of me. He was older, and he knew I was young, and I might try something. And, of course, I was not able to because I was pretty well shot up at that time. But I appreciated the fact that he did not come to me, beat me, or he did not maliciously in any way, shape, or form. And it was hard to communicate back and forth because he spoke German, I spoke English, but did this, and hand signals, and we finally eventually realized that he wanted me to go up to the cabin. And so I feel that I was not overly... Now, some men cannot probably report that. Some men could probably say that they were inhumanly treated. And like you said, your friend was shot after he landed. And there were cases of that. And we saw people get shot when they were in the parachute coming down. German aviators would shoot them while they were, use them for marksmen. And but I did not receive that type of treatment. I think the Germans were respectful. They knew more about me than I knew about myself when I was interrogated. We went to a place to be interrogated after we got out of the hospital, and they knew my commanding officer, and I'd never met my commanding officer. I wasn't there but about 20 days. We were a replacement crew. Now, a replacement crew was a crew that was made up of men who came into the service later in life. For instance, younger, I should say. The younger men, as they came in, they made up the replacement crews. Most of the boys that were on my plane were less than 20 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, my pilot was 26, and he and I were very close friends. But I had more service time than all the rest of them put together. And so you know that they were all relatively young. Young people. And
well, we sure appreciate your being able to, and your willingness to revisit an unusual time in your life, Charles. We appreciate very much the fact that you would do that. Laura, we appreciate your time. You know, Judith K., Logan County is a better place because of the Laura Andersons, Laura Slaytons and the Charles Andersons. They both make their contribution.
And the Bill Gossetts and
their mark.
Judy Busby.
And Jim Ash.
Since this falls in the middle of Memorial Day, D-Day, 68 years ago, folks, think of that, 68 years. And then, of course, coming up June 14th, Flag Day. I want to read a poem that I've read before. First, I'll make a comment that I saw this quotation somewhere. It says, "War did not determine who is right. War determines who is left." There was a Canadian doctor in the First World War that wrote in Flanders Field. And it goes, "In Flanders Field the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard among the guns below. We are the dead. Short years ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Field. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be it yours to hold high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field." Let's remember what these things have all been about. Thank you for Viewpoint.
Many people worry they don't have what it takes to manage their own investments. At Edward Jones, your financial